Anthony Grassi here for College.town at the 2026 NCAA Convention. Happy to sit down with Walsh University President Tim Collins.
Swords up, Cavaliers.
Tim, thank you for joining me.
Anthony, thank you for having us today. Thank you for being here in Washington.
Thank you for having me again. So as we sit here right now, you are the incoming Vice Chair to the D2 Executive Board come Friday.
At the end of the convention,
be in that position.
yes.
We're minutes after the session this morning gets out on the state of Division II. I'm curious what big picture, we'll start there and we'll kind of
Sure.
dive into certain things. The conversation within the room, the biggest talking point in your mind was what?
So eligibility is a big talking point here at the National Harbor. We've been talking about it all week. It's been talked about at every level throughout the membership at the NCAA here in D2, so Management Council, SAAC, students. And it's because there is a proposal comes to the floor tomorrow about changing the eligibility. We've been talking about it sort of out loud for a while around the conference, this idea of going to 5 years and 10 semesters and all that. And I think what's really happened is we've really started to think about, okay, what are the implications and the second and third order consequences of a change in the eligibility rules in this moment right now. So yesterday, the executive board, and I have the privilege to serve on that board with my colleagues on a rotating basis, working hand in hand with the NCAA staff, who we couldn't do this without. We spent a lot of time talking about what are some of the unintended consequences that might happen with a big rule change like this. And so at the course of that conversation, there were several things that bothered us, concerned us. We call it an executive board. It's really a leadership board. We're all leaders that are thinking about making sure we create the environment for the scholar athlete to get the experience that we want them to have as an essential part of their college experience as we marry together athletics and academics. And there were a couple things, Anthony, that came right to the top. The first thing that concerned us was, why is National SAAC against this? That's the student voice. We are a student-facing organization. If it's a matter of principle, we might be able to say, well, we're going to do this anyway because it's principle, but this is not about principle. This is about the implementation of something practical about how they're going to move through their experience. And so the fact that National SAAC is not just no, my personal opinion, they're hard no, is of concern. Do we really understand that? And should we work on that? I know back home on a campus, most presidents, if you get a hard no out of a really important constituent, you're probably going to step back for a minute, like, let's talk about that, and then, kind of proceed. The second thing that we were thinking about was I was a COVID president. I came in 2019, and when all of a sudden we have another year of eligibility without any planning, it's very disruptive. And on the financial side, on the athletic grant side, where is that money supposed to come from? So we have legislation tomorrow, Anthony, where we're going to offer in 27 or 28 to start a new championship. So we're going to give a year or two planning for that, but we're going to say for this eligibility change, it goes backwards, and if they're on your campus now, they can stay. So we found that to be inadequate, like we really should be financially planning this. We also think that this is about student opportunity. And so for every person that we decide is going to stay longer and longer and longer, that means somebody else isn't going to come in because we have fixed roster sizes. No one in D2's got a lot of money to spend more money on this. So our coaches haven't been given the time to plan their rosters, to think about how they're going to use their athletic grant and aid. So they maybe need some planning time too. And then I said the fourth concern at a very high level that we talked about was, the NCAA has done a lot of work in the last several years on harm reduction strategies. These things that we need to educate our students on, like alcohol, like marijuana, drugs, substance abuse, gambling, so that we can ensure that they have the education they need and we can talk about it. So we've relaxed some of the rules to facilitate conversation. So there is some concern that if you're going to enter into this no waiver rule, which is what the legislation calls for, that some student is going to have a hurt, a pain, and they're not going to say anything to their trainer because they might not be able to keep playing for someone who had a waiver yesterday. So I spent a career in the military as a fighter pilot. I did not want to talk to my doctor because I knew he would ground me. And I wasn't much older than these guys are right here, so I think this is a very real concern. We've talked to the chief medical officer about this. Is this something that we should be thinking about? And she, of course, enthusiastically encourages us to think about what is the environment we're creating so we have good communications, because some of these injuries could turn into lifelong injuries if they just power through instead of talking about it and let us help it. So all of that came together, and we said, really, maybe we should study this a little bit longer. Eligibility is a national conversation. Well, it is nationally. It's in the halls of Congress. It's on the front page of the sports news. It's on social media. It's all over D1. It's all over D2. D3 a little lesser extent. But maybe we should step back and just make sure we've really thought our way through this about holistically, what are we doing to support ourselves as a membership association whose mission is to combine academics with world-class athletics to produce leaders that are going to go out into the country and kick butt. So that led to a conversation, and then we unanimously passed a motion to come to the floor tomorrow for a referral. And what we're asking for is, it's our thoughts, it's our advice as leadership. We can't stop the process. We're not saying we want to stop the process. This is a membership organization. This is actually working exactly the way it should work. Membership has ideas, it moves through the process, and it shows up for legislation. Like, that's what we're supposed to do. But what we're saying is, as leaders looking at all these different dots, maybe we should step back and let's make sure they're all connected in the right way to support that student scholar-athlete experience. Now, it's going to take us a little time. The timeline for 27's convention, basically everything has to be buttoned up in the next couple months. This stuff is way in advance. So what we're going to ask for tomorrow is, let's defer this, refer it back to the executive board. We'll turn around, run our whole process again, get all the voices involved. Let's work with SAAC. Let's see what their concerns are and how they might be alleviated or overcome. And then by 28, just because of the cycle, we'll come back and have what we have, which could be anything. And I think we'll know a lot more. People will have a time to really think about it. So we have done this unanimously because we're just concerned about the student voice. We're an organization that's built on trust. If our scholar athletes do not trust the organization because they are hard no on something and we do it anyway without even explaining it to them, that's a hard place to build trust. So we just cannot think of a good reason to just sort of continue along. An analogy that I might use is, we're whitewater rafting. And right now we're sort of on it and the boat's kind of calm, but we know there's some rough stuff ahead of us. Should I get off now and get a bio break and make sure I'm ready to go through the rapids, or do I just keep blundering along and see what happens, and then I'm halfway down and I'm having a physiological incident? So we think, let's just move over to the shoreline for a minute, get our stuff back together, and then get back in the water and keep going.
Regroup, take a breath.
Right.
Prepare for what's
ahead. With everybody.
Correct. Is there if referring it to 28 and taking more time to evaluate all of the tentacles that may impact on campus with all the student athletes, is there an idea that legislation then, understanding how the process works, that legislative proposal needs to be understood that it's coming in 2028 earlier than a normal proposal may, given the financial implications of it?
Well, in our governance process, and we're following the rules. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is, I think, a really important part of athletics. We teach our students to follow the rules. We teach them to do that, and we all need to do this ourselves. When you go to a referral, you have to have a timeline.
Right.
So we think this is a reasonable timeline. I don't think any of us know, really, what the legislation will look like when it comes back. And I think that's the way it should be, frankly, because, in this moment with college sports, there's so much happening. We need to be open to looking around, having some awareness, and thinking about what's in the best interest of the NCAA. We're all in this together. It's world class, 556,000 scholar athletes out there counting on us to get this right. So I think when we come back in 28, it'll be through our normal process with legislation that the membership feels is appropriate, or membership will feel it's not appropriate and there won't be legislation. I don't know. But we are committed to revisiting it, going through the process again, and making sure second and third order consequences are thought about, and the implications, not just for us as D2, but also for us as the NCAA.
Taking that same approach maybe and backing it out a little bit.
Okay.
Are there challenges, given all of the change that's happening around here, in aligning, or maybe the alignment of what is right for Division II and what is best for the NCAA in certain capacities?
Well, of course, there's some measure of alignment because we're all committed to a single
Yes.
mission statement. So we start there. But there's also significant differences between D1, D2, and D3, which are all right and proper. We serve a different type of scholar athlete. It's got a slightly different purpose. We do it in a slightly different way. The new constitution that we have, when we went through that whole process, the Constitutional Convention, if you will, and we came out of that, we were very mindful of making sure that the divisions themselves can maintain the independence that they need to accomplish the mission as they best see fit. And so for us in D2, for our kind of institution, for the kind of students that we have, for where we're going, we may have some slight differences in the way we do business, as does D3, as does D1, and all that is well and proper and good. And it's somewhat amazing that we're able to maintain an association with three sort of different elements, yet we're all still trying to row in the same direction. And the direction is delivering to America young people that are ready to lead others, that understand teamwork and understand how to get things done and understand how to gut it out and understand how to reach really deep even when they don't want to. And that kind of an experience, which is why, in D2, we're really proud the statistics come out that we have the best ratio for scholar athlete to championships, 1.888 or whatever it is. And that's important because, you don't know what it feels like to be a champion unless you have the opportunity to go and be one or compete to be one. And we want our students to know what winning feels like. We talk a lot about teams, they have to learn how to win, they also have to learn how to lose. And sometimes if you've had a tough run at it, and you're trying to get back on the winning side of the ledger, you got to remember how to win. It doesn't bother me as a president at Walsh University because I personally think that, the things you learn best are when you're on your butt. When you fail, that's when you learn. It's harder sometimes to learn if you're just win, 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 win. So we talk a lot about get back up. You got to get back up. And so I think we can still maintain our independence. We can still do things differently. D1 can still do things the way they want to do it for some of the things they're doing while they're, creating Olympians and all the things that they're doing. And we can do it our way. And D3 can, keep doing it their way. I mean, D3, I think in general, they're like, we're a 4-year program. We're not interested in changing eligibility. Have a nice day. Okay, that works for them. That's great. And, there's 5,000 colleges in America. And I think that's awesome that our students in America and all the ones from around the world that want to come here, there's a lot of choices. There's a lot of different ways to get to the same place. And that is a strength, and we want to make sure that we maintain that strength and we stay together as an association and continue to provide the most amazing college athletic experience anywhere on the planet.
As a university president, every time we hear Charlie Baker speak, he usually mentions the fact that the NCAA is the greatest leadership development model that exists in the country.
Yeah.
500,000 student athletes that are all competing in a incredibly high capacity, in addition to all the things they're learning as they compete alongside as part of being a student athlete. I'm curious how you think about the marriage between athletics and academics as the challenges around higher ed continue to proliferate, as we've seen certain pockets where institutions have pushed for academic programs in support of or aligned with athletic participation. How do you think about that through your presidential lens?
Yes, I think through my presidential lens, one of my primary responsibilities is to try to look ahead, look around the corner. Charlie's trying to do that. Every one of us that are serving on this rotational basis through the executive board, we're trying to do that. And as I sort of look around the corner, I do worry about Charlie's model here. He's right. It is, a global, unbelievable leadership development program. And so therefore, if we keep changing a lot of different rules and the way that college athletics work, And rather than bringing athletics and academics closer together, we push it further and further apart. I think all these questions on eligibility and financial aid and all of this, these are the penultimate questions, Anthony. For me, I think what's around the corner is, why do you need to enroll in college to be in college athletics anymore? And I think you could build an argument that you can take this unbelievable leadership development program and make it available to students who are in high school that are great athletes, but they're not book savvy. They don't want to be. And all they want to do is they want to hone their athletic skills and turn that into a way of life. They want to monetize that, if you will. So you essentially could become just a simple workforce development program if you're not careful, and you'll just have people cycling through that are there only for athletics. They would never even sign up for a class. And how do you argue that they shouldn't be eligible for that if you set the conditions so that you continue to diminish the importance of academics? These two things work best in this development program that Charlie's talking about when they work together, not when they work separately. Now, that's not to say you can't have some guys that are just really smart and some guys that aren't maybe as gifted but can be great leaders. But remember, we're going for 556,000 of them every year, year after year after year after year. That's an amazing capability. And when you look at all the statistics about what former college athletes do in the business world, in the communities, in their families, they are amazing leaders. And they step up, they step out. And that's what we do, but it's because we've combined it. And that's why our mission statement says world-class athletics with academics to try to improve their lifelong situation. And so I worry that if we go too far on stripping away the environment, the things around that have created the environment, that set the conditions, the rules of play, if you will, to ensure it's an academic and athletic experience, that we're going to wake up and the fight we're going to have, on the national scene is, I don't think that we even need to have college kids involved anymore. And so therefore there's no federal aid. So therefore, you just can run down all those different things. Everything changes when that happens. And I don't think we're ready for that. And I just think we should make sure we're thinking about what's around the corner so we don't run into that. Because I don't believe there's a single president, Anthony, or chancellor, or anybody on the NCAA staff that thinks this is just a workforce development program. I mean, to the last person standing, this is about improving the lives of our athletes, our scholar athletes, so that they will go out and improve the lives of others.
As you maybe change hats from your presidential hat in that capacity to your incoming executive board vice chair role, what protections, what things need to be done to prevent from getting to that?
Yeah.
And it can be, I guess you can take it both association and division specific.
Yeah. Well, first, I'm honored that, it's an elected thing and that my peers, my colleagues would say, Tim, why don't you give that a shot? And, I'm there to serve the chair. She'll set the agenda for us. But I think that the one thing, and we've talked about this, at the board level, just sort of, on the sidelines, I think we have to revisit. It's time for a review of the transfer portal. Right? We came along and we set this up, 10 years ago, almost 10 years ago, and the landscape was different, the purpose was different, how we thought it would. We did it because we thought this would be something that would just ease the transfer for the scholar athlete. It's a fact that a third of all students today graduating from colleges or universities in the United States are not graduating at the place they started. That's not a scholar athlete number, Anthony. Mm-hmm. That's like all. So there's a third of them. That's what started this eligibility conversation in the NCAA, is that 30% that are going on to a fifth year. 30% of our students are going on to a fifth year. This is just, the data is clear on that. It could be because they're an engineering program. It could be for all kinds of things. So we were trying to think about what can we do to help continue the student experience, the scholar-athlete experience in athletics for that 30%. That's where the eligibility thing started. That's not where it's ended. But so as we look at the transfer portal, like just a simple thing like the rules. In D1, if you go into the transfer portal, they can take your aid. In D2, we can't. We can only do it once a year in the summertime. So an athlete is not disincentivized to be in and out of that portal all the time, because I still have to keep paying, even though I know they're not committed to me. I have coaches that are on professional development tracks. They're coaches because they wanted to develop young men and women. They don't want to just rent them as missionaries just for like 1 year in D2 space. I'm just talking from a D2 perspective. They're in it to develop them to be men and women of character, to understand how to work with others, and they're just not there on borrowed time. And so these students that come, in and out, and every year, I mean, I think someone did the math. If you did this wrong, you could end up with a guy or a gal with 18 years of eligibility. Okay, part of the problem with the national conversation on student debt with colleges is they're not supposed to be here for 18 years. They're not supposed to be here for 6 years, 7 years, 8 years. So we have all this debt. Well, yeah, no kidding. We got to get it back to 4. It's a 4-year experience. When American higher education began, it was a 3-year experience. And we went to 4 because they weren't ready. And now what we're experiencing is they're at 4 and they're not ready, but this is a lot of the leftover from what happened to America and the education system during COVID. And so we're trying to meet all those demands at the same time. So I think transfer portal is worth a review. Like, let's just look at it. What are we doing? But I think that comes out when we look at eligibility. And so looking ahead, I think we just have to be mindful of where the sands are shifting on a national scene, how the Congress feels. Part of this is Congress hasn't really been in the conversation because it hasn't been a national conversation. College sports today, I think we're a national conversation now. I think that's a good thing. We are a national asset. The NCAA is a jewel in America's hand. We're an asset to her, and we got to make sure we take care of this. And so we'll see what other things we need to think about, but for sure the financial stability will be a topic for us, the moving around. I have 3 children, all 3 transferred. I can just say from my own personal experience, it's disruptive financially, it's disruptive socially, it's disruptive academically. This is not a good thing. Now, there might be a reason why people need to change, and we just have recent data. We just finished a big study on the NCAA, did a big study on why do people pick a college or not pick a college. Your coach leaves. We get all that. But every year? No, we also need to teach them commitment, and we need to teach them sometimes it's not going your way. Suck it up. And we need to teach them that not every boss you ever have in your whole life you're going to love and want to kiss them on the lips. There are people that sometimes it's going to be kind of tough. So get yourself through that. Because you know what? The people that work for you, they may not like you. So you ought to be a little empathetic to that. So they need to learn those lessons, and so we need to make sure we're listening to the student voice, we understand their concerns, we can talk to them, but we stay focused on the prize. And the prize is we are sending out into the world men and women that are ready to lead with a combination of this academic and athletic experience that's unmatched in the world.
As you think through as we sit here in D.C., the challenges that the NCAA faces, do you have a strong opinion on how Congress should be involved in helping solidify maybe the uncertainty that exists within primarily Division I?
I think the limits of my opinion are they ought to be involved and we ought to be talking about this. I mean, diamonds are made with heat and pressure. We need some heat and pressure on this. Legislatively, I was retired before I went to Walsh University at Johns Hopkins University at the Applied Physics Lab, and I had the privilege of leading government relations there, so I have a fair amount of time on the Hill. I want them in the conversation. We want their ideas. Many of them are products of the NCAA as well. So it's not like they don't understand us,
right,
but they don't understand why we've changed. And we haven't changed because we haven't had a national conversation on this. So I think this could be a part of a conversation along with workforce development and the educational system that we have in America, which seems to have deteriorated over time. How do we re-inject in it, re-infuse what we need to continue to be the place that everybody in the world wants to come to for an education?
How have you, your conference, your membership, student athletes on campus, et cetera, members of SAAC, been engaged with Congress, whether that be on a local level, whether we're here in D.C., whatever it may be, to help communicate the realities that are on campus now? Because as you mentioned, there are a number of members in Congress and Senate who are former student athletes, but things have changed.
Things have changed, and they need to hear it not from me, as the 66-year-old guy, with gray hair, who's a grandfather of 15 grandkids. They need to hear it from the students who are on the field of competition today. So we anxiously, excitedly look forward to it every chance we get to introducing the members. I know in my own district in the state of Ohio, introducing our legislators, our political leadership, to the scholar athlete of today. They need to hear it from them too. And so that's been a missing piece. We're getting much better at that, bringing our athletes here to town and introducing them to them. But I think that as the conversation grows and everyone gets a little more focused, not just on reminding ourselves why the NCAA came together and what it's done over the course of our history, but also understanding what's changed in the education world, and then how we're now preparing people, not for careers. That's a personal opinion. I don't think it's possible right now to understand what a career is for this generation, but I do know this: we're getting them ready for jobs, and we don't know what the jobs are. So we need to make sure they can think, and they can lead, and they can act ethically, morally straight, do the right thing. Make sure the boundaries are set, the parameters are set. And I'm reminded of General Marshall, who was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff during World War II. He's a 1901 VMI, Virginia Military Institute graduate. And at some point, he said, "I have a very important secret mission I need to get done. Bring me a West Point football player." There was a sense of what it meant to be a scholar athlete. I think that sense is gone, and we need to reinstill that back in America to remind them of how important this is to our future.
Very well said. I'll get you out of these last two, maybe three topics.
Sure.
You mentioned earlier about some harm reduction stuff. We saw Division II vote to change the sports gambling rules.
Yes.
That then Division III supported, Division I supported, then Division I said never mind.
Yeah.
As we sit here right now, we're within the last 2 hours, the federal government unsealed an indictment that basically alleged that 17 Division I schools were involved in some capacity in price or fixing 3 dozen plus games. I'm curious where you think the division, the association should move with sports gambling, given its continued proliferation with continued ads. We've got prediction markets now into the mix here that changes the access even more, all on top of the added pressures to student athletes, especially those making the most money at the highest level.
Right. Yeah, all these social issues, these social ills that we have are really tough ones to handle. I think we need to make sure we're conscious of, again, what we're trying to instill with them, but we have to be in the real world. And so the harm reduction strategies that the NCAA uses tries to balance both of those. So, I know in the state of Ohio, when we legalized marijuana, and the budget comes out, and the first 35% of all the money generated from cannabis in the state of Ohio has to go to education programs to tell people not to use cannabis. Okay, so do the adults in the room know this is not a good idea? I mean, this is an entry-level drug. Sports betting is not unlike alcohol in that it can become an addiction, and our students can be harmed by this. So we're trying to navigate a path where we can create the conditions where we can talk about this. We know from the data, from the research, that for this age group, harm reduction strategies can be very effective. This isn't true for every age group, but for this age group, and so that's the path we're on to see how that works. I discourage it with our student athletes, with our students. I discourage gambling. I said the only one you want to bet on is yourself. And spend all your time, effort, and energy and your money investing in yourself. And then let somebody else take the money from somewhere else. Because most of us know when you pull the little how you doings, at the casino or whatever, you're going to lose. You're just like throwing that money away. So instead of just throwing it out in the wind, just turn around and invest it in yourself. So I think we're just going to see how this unfolds. It doesn't surprise us. We saw what happened in the NBA. I mean, where there's money, that becomes an incentive, it becomes a problem. This is fundamentally, I think, my concern on the transfer portal. We've taken the focus off of educational attainment and turned it on to financial incentives. That's the wrong focus. We gotta swing that thing back. Gambling does the same thing. It takes it off of individual preparation, spending their time doing healthy things, and puts them on the path to an addiction. We should have learned somewhere around in the 20s about what gambling can do. But now we have all these new technologies and all this stuff. I appreciate the work the NCAA does to sniff this stuff out, shut this stuff down. They know when it's really some of these commercial opportunities. They're making it easy on an app, all that kind of stuff. I mean, the NCAA is not shy about stepping in there and say, knock that off. Nope, you're hurting our students. And we just need all of America to stand up and say, we're hurting students here. And until it really yes, I'm hurting students, that maybe that will help us find another way to deal with reality. We have to be real, we have to be pragmatic, but we also have to hold to the principles that we need men and women of ethical character to go out and lead. So we don't want to mix that up.
As we wrap up here, I'm curious how you think about the role of athletics at Walsh, and the potentially, this would be the wrong way to phrase it, the different philosophy or approach that institutions may have towards athletics, and maybe that's more tied to the resources that institutions have to support athletics.
Well, before we go down the resources path, so I'm an Air Force Academy graduate, and at all of our service academies, everyone that goes is an athlete. You either play intercollegiate or you're 3-season intramurals. Nobody's laying in their bed at 4 o'clock in the afternoon taking a nap. You're on a field, you're in competition, you're doing something. So at Walsh University, sort of like Charlie, I hadn't thought about the way you said Charlie did, but I make the claim that athletics is the largest leadership laboratory on our campus. And everything that touches it, feeds it, fuels it, benefits from it. So the kind of students that we get, they're attracted to that being a major muscle movement on our campus. That doesn't work on every campus. I have 800 scholar athletes out of my 2,200 student population. We have a lot of athletes, but it's not just about athletics, which is why we love Life in the Balance D2, because we can talk about family and we can talk about faith and we can talk about other things, not just your total, commitment to your sport or your team. Yeah, you need to learn that. But there's also other things. And our campus benefits when those athletes get involved in other non-athletic activities, which is where we get the pay, right? Because they're leaders, they're natural leaders. They understand that in order to get something done, you have to work towards it. And so much of the American culture, we just want to lay on our couch and have it given to us. That hasn't, permeated into athletics yet. We understand you have to lift, you have to go to practice, you have to do those kind of things. So for us at Walsh University, athletics is a big part of what we do. It's not the only thing that we do. It's not at the diminishment of anybody else and what they're doing. We find a lot of our scholar athletes deeply involved in other things, in student government and other kinds of activities. And we find students that, go and support their friends and their roommates and all that, in a little competition and can, walk alongside of their roommate who's, playing on the game Saturday night. So for us, it's a great match. I wouldn't want to wake up someday and that's the only thing we do. I think that that's not realistic. They're going to go out into the world where they're going to deal with people that are athletes and are not athletes. You have to learn how to deal with both. Right. You're going to deal with people that are more gifted than you, that are less gifted than you, either intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, socially, whatever. You have to learn how to deal with the full spectrum, because we don't know where they're going. And so talking about meaning and purpose, which is a private faith-based institution as Walsh University is in the Catholic tradition, gives us that ability to talk about what is the ultimate goal here. What is your purpose? Why is it? One of the problems in America is we've stopped telling young people, hey, Anthony, you are special. You are unique. Only you are you. You've been given gifts that only you have. If you don't live out those gifts, they're not going to get used. They're not going to have the impact they're meant to have. And all of us are unique in our own way with our own gifts. And I can prove this to people. I do all the time. I say, just look at your index finger and ask yourself, why are you the only one with that fingerprint? No one else has that fingerprint. So the question is, what are you going to do with it? So we can talk about that in a D2 school, in a faith-based school, in a very free and open way with all kinds of people, whatever their faith tradition is or isn't. Because we're just trying to get them ready for that first destination for their life and their life's purpose, which comes all the way back around to the NCAA. That's our mission here too, getting them ready ultimately for life.
And how do you think about the differences in, as maybe in your executive board role, the difference in how institutions support athletics given the challenges they face on their own campuses as it relates to the path forward for Division
Yeah,
II?
like we can even start thinking about mergers and acquisitions and all that sort of stuff. This is the beauty of, what the NCAA is. It gives us a platform for presidents and chancellors, as well as our athletic directors and coaches, to come together, not just to get educated, but to connect and to understand how different people are thinking about and meeting different kinds of challenges. None of us have to feel like we're out there by ourselves. So, in the executive board, what I love most about it is I get to hear some really interesting ideas and the way people are thinking about, the way they're handling the same situation I have. They're doing it slightly different. Wow, maybe that will work over here. And they can hear that I'm talking about something like, my gosh, we have that too. So it brings us together to talk about that. So where this goes in mergers and acquisitions, it's just true that we just graduated in America the most number of high school graduates we've ever graduated in the history of America. It's also true that in the last 10 years, we've closed 15,000 high schools around the nation. And most people don't realize that that's happening right underneath their nose. So there's a shrinking pool of people that would be eligible, if you will, to go off to college. We call this the demographic cliff. We're over it now. We're in the free fall. Here we go. Smaller numbers of people. So it would seem that we have too much infrastructure for that same decreasing numbers of students. And we're seeing this in the marketplace. Schools are closing. They're thinking about mergers, acquisitions. We've had a couple in Ohio. I think there's recent data that shows that almost 60% of presidents and chancellors in America right now today are in a conversation about a merger or an acquisition with somebody. And I'll put myself in that category too. That I think we owe it to our institution to be trying to think around the corner. It doesn't mean we have to do anything, right? But we ought to be thinking about it, what would be the implication, how we do that. Because when an institution gets in trouble, you got to make sure that you got enough runway to get out of trouble. And if you wait till you're at the very last taxiway, I'm a pilot, a fighter pilot, if you're at the last taxiway and you realize you're in trouble, you got nothing in front of you. You're going off the runway. So that's what we don't want to have happen. And so we have I would say it's a very healthy conversation at the presidential level, at the board level, on what other schools are doing and how they're thinking about it. I think the NCAA is kind of having to think their way through this too, because there's implications about the kinds of institutions and how they come together and what sort of adjustments do we need to make in our rule set that will accommodate this. And all that is completely fair, proper. We should be doing this. This is just meeting the needs of our scholar students today. These are just our challenges today. And putting our head in the sand and pretending it's not a problem is not going to actually make it any better. So I fully anticipate there's more of this in the future, not less of this. I don't know what it'll look like. It tends to be, a David and Goliath kind of a thing. Big school, things are good. Little school, things are bad. I'll suck you up, and I don't know. I don't think that's going to be the case in all cases. I think it'll be interesting to see the relationships that we form in athletics with schools that are in different kinds of relationships with each other. This has got to be a national conversation because the federal government will be chasing after us. You guys are colluding. You're doing, all this sort of stuff, on institutional stuff. The insight on how how in America we're thinking about that from eligibility, I think there's some things that poured over into this mergers and acquisitions conversation that, yes, we're independent. Yes, we want to make sure that we don't have a monopoly, that we have a good, free, fair market for everyone. But yes, we have to make sure that we have this available to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you can be really blind and just run yourself right into a wall. So we're pretty much eyes wide open on this. So I think a year from now, 2 years from now, you're going to have some probably really interesting people to sit here and talk to about how's that relationship going with that new whatever that you've just created, and talking with the NCAA about how are they thinking about that. I mean, you could imagine a day where even the lines blur between D1, D2, and D3. We already have D2 schools with D1 sports teams on their campus. So those are the seeds of what's about to happen. And so there's some seams there that aren't exactly clean, that we need to understand that until we can do this at scale. So that's where we're at. The other thing I think that we're thinking about at Walsh University, for instance, why can't we have 2 NCAA D2 teams in the same sport?
Both varsity?
Yeah. You got, 100 kids that want to play baseball, and they're good. Why can't we have 2 baseball teams? I don't know. I think we should think about that and talk about that and understand that, instead of, having, a squad of so-called, the varsity, and then most of them are reserve. Because the student that's thinking about D2, they're still thinking about really competitive athletics. And so we're thinking about that scholar-athlete experience. How can we maximize the experience for every one of them, not just some of them? That's part of the problem with the eligibility rule. It takes care of some, but we're supposed to take care of all. And we should understand that the rule set that we create in this environment does our best for the common good.
Beautiful way to end. Tim, thank you for joining me here in D.C., taking the time.
Thank you for having us today, and really thank you so much for all that you do all year long, helping all of us in D2 be informed about what's happening all around us.
I appreciate the comments.
You're the
Thank
man.
you, sir.
Swords up, sir.